good to see everyone. I know there are a couple of folks who had conflicts and couldn't be here, but hopefully some others will be joining here shortly. I did want to give us a moment to have Stacy and Shelley introduce themselves, because I know you've likely been on some of the calls before, but I just know you are both, so Shelley, I know you're representing Dawn, and then Stacy wanted you to be able to tell everyone your new role too.
Okay, I guess I'll go ahead and go first then. So I'm Stacy Gates. Previously, I've been just working with Lisa side by side kind of thing. She's always been my go-to person, but she has accepted a new role and she started that this past Monday. So I guess now I'm the new Lisa. I probably won't be as great as her right from the start, but I'm definitely trying to pick up where she left off on things and kind of take over a lot of the projects that she was the lead on. So
welcome. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shelley Walker. I am with MDHHS. I'm the Food Assistance Employment and Training Analyst, and I focus on FAE&T. Dawn is my boss, so she was not able to come today. So I'm Dawn today. So
great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So today is the last in the last official of the 5-part series. And we are going to be covering we've talked about the funding, we've talked about and budgeting pieces, we've talked about program development pieces, we've talked about how to build on existing programs and strengths of the colleges, the partnerships, and then walked through some of the proposal process. And so today is going to be looking at, again, kind of bringing it back to the why and focusing on the student. So the participants we are wanting to serve and create opportunity for, and then talking a little bit about what does that logistically actually look like to, in terms of will you use Osmos for some of the tracking? What does the case management look like? So when you're at that point, one of the other pieces we do want to be really clear about is there's an opportunity if there are specific topics that there are still kind of some sticking points or questions about related to proposal or related to any of the topics we've covered, we will send out an email and a poll that folks could sign up for. We'll kind of look at what the needs are and interests are, and we could put together a future learning series, or if regionally there's some support that we could provide in the proposal process, we are very happy to do that. So that's more to come. So that is the purpose of today's meeting. So to kick it off, one of the things we wanted to do is bring it back to the center of the student. So bring it back to the why, which I think is really helpful when trying to work through the complexities of this project. And so unfortunately, we couldn't have the students here in virtually joining us, but we do have a clip of a panel that we had with some SNAP E&T students that we wanted to play. And I know a couple of you have seen some of this. I will also say I got to I think I listened to this thing three times getting through, and I like listening to students over and over, but I think it speaks to the power of this model. It speaks to the power of working through the partnerships and really finding and leveraging expertise across the higher ed workforce system, and just kind of, I think, is a good reminder of the impact that it can have. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you to tee it up while I get it ready here.
Yeah, so these are 2 students that have been, who have accessed the SNAP E&T grant in Oregon at our community colleges. The first one you'll see is Lynn Hamblin, who is a student at Rogue Community College, which is in Southern Oregon, more rural, a small college. And she started in the GED program and accessed our STEP grant, which is SNAP E&T here. And then she was part of a an IET program, and now actually works in the adult ed office supporting SNAP ENT students while she's still working towards her degree. And then Shalise Williams is a student at Portland Community College, our largest higher ed institution in the state. She was part of a healthcare IET program. She came in through a partnership that Kate and I worked on when we were both still at PCC with a Head Start program. So she's a foster parent and learned about this program and the STEP grant through that. She's a returning, both of them are adult returning students. And then we had a third student who was supposed to join us from Treasure Valley Community College in Eastern Oregon, right on the Idaho border, very rural as well. And he came down with laryngitis, so he couldn't join us, but we tried to add in some of his content. And James, also a returning student, referral through the VR system. He had an injury on the job. And he also became a peer navigator to support other SNAP ENT students while working towards his own healthcare credential.
So with that, I will start this. Let me know if you can't hear it, please, or wait.
In my orientation for GED that I met Brandon.
One clarification I want to offer: STEP, they'll talk about STEP program over and over, or sometimes they say the SNAP program. That is Oregon SNAP 50/50. So that's Oregon's FAET plus. Just wanted to clarify that too before we launched.
My GED STEP coordinator, and my STEP journey began in my GED program. Then also followed me with and supported me through concurrent enrollment. So I was able to take college level classes. They paid for my STEP paid for my tuition, STEP paid for my books. Before the pandemic, I also received gas funding to get to campus to attend those college classes. Then in spring, when everything went digital and online, I had 3 kids at home and wasn't able to go back. But it was a fellow STEP student and friend that I made through the program talked me into coming back in the fall, because thankfully my children, the 2 youngest ones, were able to start kindergarten on campus at their schools, thankfully. So thankfully. So that I was able to come back and resume my journey. And if it wasn't for the STEP program and the people I've met in the program talking me into coming back, I never would have finished my GED. And then the STEP program followed me through my concurrent enrollment while working on my GED, and then into my college classes where I already had all of my prereqs taken care of and 2 of my college classes taken care of during my GED journey through the concurrent enrollment program, and supported me through the rest of my career pathway certificate in business, where again, gas support, tuition support, textbook support, calculators for my math classes. Thankfully, my kids were at school on campus, but they would have offered daycare supports. And then while working on my college classes, being able to be a peer support mentor through student employment with the STEP program, I was able to give back to students who were just now in the same journey that I was on and be able to get them excited. And I think that was one thing that really struck me speaking with James the other day was he had a huge peer mentor role at his college, and just the passion he had behind everything he had to say about supporting other students and help guiding them through these programs that supported us and gave us new outlook on life, really.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn, for sharing that, both in the ways that the STEP grant assisted you in the concurrent enrollments. I know some of the folks on this call are integrating their SNAP ENT into integrated education and training. So that's the equivalent at Rogue is the co-enrollment is their version of IET, in both the staffing support with Brandon and then the resources. And appreciate you touching on James, and I'll go a little bit further. I mean, James has shared with us that he was, through work study, able to be a peer mentor, which is a unique way that his college integrated the STEP grant and provided additional support beyond just the career coaches. And what was powerful in the way James described it was he was able to, similar to Lynn now in her role, connect with other STEP students in a way that staff may not be able to because they may not have had the same experience in the program as a student. And so James was able to reassure them that, sort of normalizing the grant and the opportunity and the realities that students were facing, and then really connect them with the right resources on campus and beyond. And one of the other things James talked about was that WorkSource, which in Oregon is our one-stop system, our public workforce system, also had a STEP grant. And so there were ways to sort of maximize these resources through the college, but then if the college didn't have the resources to pay for an additional cost, then the WorkSource STEP grant could. So couldn't be duplicative, but it could be complementary. And that was part of what James shared. And the last thing I'll add to that was, in his role as a peer mentor, he was able to hear some and observe some real common threads of students. So, I mean, he shared that he wasn't a parenting student when he was in school, but a lot of the students he was working with were bringing forward the challenge of childcare, and he was able to then elevate that to college leaders of this is a reality that students in the STEP grant are facing that he was hearing when he was working as a peer mentor. So we'll add that in. I think if I can come back to you, Charlize, I wanted to ask you to talk more about the Career Pathways program that you participated, the health care career certificate, and ask you what elements of the model were valuable to you and how did it compare to your prior experience as a student at PCC?
Hey, Mark, thank you. So, going back to school after so many years being older, it can be a little bit intimidating. You don't really know what you're walking into again. But with this program, it was small, intimate setting. I want to say maybe like 20 students. And we went to every class together. We didn't have to incorporate, with other outside students. That's, I think, what made it more successful. We did work study together. We did outside, homework sessions together. They even had a specific class that was geared just for study time, where we sat in there, we bounced ideas off of each other that made it more successful. We had a variety of ages from a young, I think she was 17-year-old mother from a 60-year-old woman that had came from another country that was once a nurse, but because her credentials didn't transfer over, she had to restart the program, from scratch. And this particular program gave her the opportunity to start somewhere, and so that's what I liked about it. It was more of like a togetherness, a community. Everybody was rooting for each other. We wanted everyone to be successful. I don't think it was one person in our group that didn't graduate with some type of certificate. And so I love that, because when I started many years ago on this college journey, I didn't really know how to navigate through college. They don't teach you this in school. They don't teach you, what it takes to work the college system. Me just going into the community college, I'm picking up brochures for interests of who I would like to be at that time. And, they give you a list of all these classes, and you meet with this counselor maybe one time, and he tells you, okay, well, these are the prereqs, but he doesn't tell you like, okay, taking math with writing and then a science will be too overwhelming for you as a mother. But the STEP program makes sure that the classes are geared to the everyday person. I could function and navigate through these classes and still work a full load and still be a mother, and not be tired and still do my homework and still, I think at the time, I want to say I got a 4.0. I ended up on the president's or the dean's list when I was at the SNAP program. So it's very successful. And in the past, when I tried to navigate, yes, I got a few credits, but they weren't accumulating to something. They weren't adding up to the degree that I wanted to, pursue. And So that's what I wasn't learning, is that I was wasting a lot of time, even though I'm gaining education, it just wasn't getting me nowhere, and I was getting wore out. I was getting tired. But with the SNAP program, it gives you little wins along the way. On the way to pursuing my degree, I've earned 2 certificates and a degree and another degree. It just keeps pushing you. It's like a stepping stone, you know. Every time you get a success, you're like, oh, okay, well, I can do this. Oh, well, I could do that, you know. And so that's what I like about it. And I like I told Mark, you know, anytime I hear someone that's struggling or saying that they can't do it or feel that they're not, you know, they're too old, I'm like, you know, anyone can do it. I went back to school at 40 years old, just with a high school degree, because I went out in the workforce and I couldn't afford to feed my family with what they were wanting to give me with the education I had. And being a mother doesn't always transpire on a resume, you know, and so I needed a gap to be filled. I needed them to see that, you know, all this adult life, I have something to give you, to show you that I accomplished. And within 3 years, I've accomplished 3 degrees and 2 certificates. Like, you know, that I couldn't even fathom that like 3 years ago. If you had to talk to me 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't even have told you I would have been earning a degree. And so.
Mark, do you want to facilitate or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. So that I think we wanted to play those clips of, you know, 2 students and then representing a third, to really illustrate, you know, it illustrates the power of coaching. So of the case management component, of the supportive services, of how this SNAP ENT or FAET Plus can be a really powerful strategy for all those, you know, many students who stopped out during the pandemic and who aren't returning. That's been a huge equity gap. And just for the many students as well who didn't know that they could access college and that could be an option and that needed a pathway for better training. And then, you know, Shelley's talked about the cohort approach too. And so that's another thing that can be supported with SNAP ENT, with FAET. And then those partnerships between the James at Treasure Valley Community College, when we were talking with the college president, and then some of the leaders involved in that work and the coach really said that they had their SNAP ENT program really allowed them to align partnerships between their one-stop systems, so their work source, between Voc Rehab in different ways, and then the college resources. And so they had, you know, they're in a small community and they had worked together, but they, a lot of times it was in parallel or not aligned. And so they talked about this as really a powerful strategy for that. So I guess wanted to highlight that, and then just would love to hear any reactions or thoughts from any of you from listening to student voices and perspective.
I can share. It was really touching to hear the students share their perspective about being able to balance home life and work and going to school. And it sounds like with a true case management model, you really get to know the students, and it helps inform their workload with their classes. When the student said, taking this science class and this math class would be too much, knowing about other things that you have going on just really speaks to the personal touch that this program brings. So I liked hearing that from the student.
Thank you, Precious. Yeah, I think it is. It's like that whole student, right? And having ways to like, not only does it lead to better outcomes, but it just has such a transformative impact that you can hear from students in that kind of level of care too, and belonging that's created. Anyone else?
I'll share one more thing. I really like hearing the student stories. When the student said that in her cohort or their cohort, everyone either was retained to the institution or obtained a credential. That's powerful. That's what we want to see. And I think that that helps turn over some leaders who might be hesitant to scale this, that there's a return for the institution, but more importantly for the students.
If I could add to that, Precious, the challenge is the sort of dominant perspective on, at least as I think about adult ed students who may start in GED or English language learning, that they may not be college ready. They could never be successful in a career technical ed career pathway program. And when you have 100% completion with some additional support, be it through the STEP grant or an additional faculty who's complementing the content with some foundational skills, if it's digital literacy, if it's other foundational skills, it really illustrates that students can be successful. In fact, in some cases, even more so than what we would say would be traditional students in CTE programs. So I think that's a really good point. And just one quick thing from your first comment, it does reinforce the nature of this program in terms of it being an equity approach, right? So when we launched this in Oregon, 1 or 2 colleges started with this, every STEP student can get this much, or they can get a gas card and this and this. And we learned in time and recognized like that's not an equity approach, because students have unique needs and situations. So if every student gets the same amount, that's not really meeting the student's needs completely. And it's not honoring their, just their realities. And there is flexibility in this grant relative to others where we can say this student may need a little bit more because of these their situation, whereas another student may just need the gas card and they're fine because they've got other resources through WorkSource or through another grant or funding to cover tuition and books. And so just appreciated that comment as well, and how that reinforces the opportunity with this grant to really keep it as an equity approach.
Any other comments before we move to the eligibility and assessment pieces or reflections? Okay. So we're going to touch a little bit on just student eligibility and assessment, and welcome anyone jumping in and want to hear from all of you a little bit too. And so I guess one of the things just kind of want to touch on just the foundational eligibility pieces, which are especially important considerations right now as some of the SNAP student eligibility will change as with the ending of the public health emergency on May 11th. So for the FANT program, a student needs to be receiving SNAP and not TANF. So that's, that is something that does sometimes fluctuate over the course of their journey. So we'll just want to, and you will be able to verify that through the process. And Stacy will get into that a little bit. And then there is, as part of every SNAP ENT, SNAP 50/50 program in the country, there's a required kind of orientation and assessment and a case plan that needs to happen. The orientation it can really just be a one-on-one conversation. That's pretty straightforward. I know folks have played around with group orientations, and I've never seen that really take off anywhere, because it's a very personalized kind of conversation too, especially when talking about basic needs and security. So it's really meeting with someone, getting information about the program, and then an assessment that will need to be done. First, it's done on the human service kind of referral side. And then it is also done, and through the MWA will be where that occurs. And then there's the actual assessment that would happen with the provider. So in this case, the colleges, about what components or program or services are a good fit for the student. One of the things really want to encourage you to do is to build that in to existing assessments you already have. So if there is an onboarding process at your college, or if you have kind of an intake process with your adult ed program or your career pathway program or your workforce program, your basic needs center, there are certain elements that need to be included for ENT, but you can add those in. So what I've seen a lot of states do is just take, you know, a process and form that's already working, whether that's paper form or electronic or both, and just adding any specific components that need to occur for FAE ENT. And so it really can be a student-centered process. I think encouraging, I know SJI has done a lot of really good work with us around their student-centered design pieces and their SNAP ENT TA is really thinking about how does that just get integrated as a norm, right? So like in your student registration and onboarding process, how are there questions in there that can flag and get students connected to SNAP and SNAP ENT? So there's considerations for that. And then the last piece really want to highlight is as the public health emergency ends, that means that students, some of those additional exemptions that were available of having an EFC of 0 or being eligible for a work study and not in one will roll back. And so that means that will potentially start impacting students in like July-ish was when that would start rolling out. One of the things, engagement in a SNAP ENT program is a qualifying exemption for students to be eligible for SNAP. And so that's when a reverse referral can come into play. And basically what that means is you could have the college identify a student who seems like they will likely be eligible for, could qualify based on their income and their household for SNAP. Colleges don't make that determination. And then there could be a referral to human services to apply for SNAP, and with a form that says, hey, if they are qualified for SNAP, we're enrolling them in our FAE ENT Plus program, and that meets the student exemption. So that is another consideration just in your process and that back and forth. And I really welcome Michigan folks to step into about what that would look like with your process through MWA as well. But just wanted to kind of highlight that as very broad brush about student eligibility assessment, and then welcome our other partners to jump in, and Stacy, Shelley, especially to kind of offer some added Michigan context too.
Can I ask a clarifying question, or maybe, hopefully, make a clarifying statement? I don't believe the MWA does anything around the eligibility piece. So that, as far as I understand, and please, Stacy and Shelley, chime in here, but I think that happens through OSMIS, but not MWAs don't really play a role in that. So it would really be a communication specifically between DHHS. And I would say, that is something that is probably something that needs to be flagged, because even in Washington, where this was very well established, we would still run into issues sometimes with students getting referred through the reverse referral model and being told by the eligibility worker that they weren't eligible. And we had to make a form actually that they could take and say, no, yes, I'm referred into an ENT program that would therefore make me eligible. So yeah, I'd be curious from Shelley and Stacy what they think about that.
So this is Shelley. Yes, that's correct. So the MWA does not make eligibility decisions. So that's on the DHS side. So our process on the DHS side is we usually have the specialists speaking to clients when clients come into the office and apply for food assistance. Our best practice is for them to, right at the interview with the FAP application, we call it FAP in Michigan, sorry, with our SNAP applications, they do go over all of the FAE&T referral process, if they'd be a good fit for that program. And if they are, then we go ahead and we enter that referral into our Bridges system. We have an interface that will send that referral over to the MWA. At that point, Stacy's team takes over, and they set up orientation with this with the student and explain all of the MWA side of things. So if the client, if the student is not eligible for food assistance, we don't generally send a referral over. But, you know, as you stated, sometimes that does happen where we find out information after the fact, after the referral, and the student isn't eligible for food assistance. And then, you know, at that point, unfortunately, they can't participate in the FAE&T program. But yes, we do decide eligibility over at DHS, not at MWA. Hopefully that answers your question.
This is Stacy. I also have something, I guess, to kind of piggyback on what Shelley was saying, and also maybe to clarify maybe if there's like a difference in understanding regarding eligibility. So speaking of like the eligibility, like Shelley was explaining with receiving food assistance itself, yes, that is taken on DHS's side. But I know that like with some of our third-party providers, for example, and I think that it would work probably similarly with community colleges, is they say that they have a customer there and they're trying to find out if they are able to participate in the FAE&T Plus program. So not that they're determining if they're eligible for food assistance, because that customer could already be receiving food assistance, but they're trying to figure out if they would be a good fit for FAE&T Plus. So looking at it in terms of that, the community college would want to make sure that the customer is receiving food assistance and not receiving cash assistance. And in that case, then they would request an electronic referral through whatever their MWA's internal process is. So different MWAs have different processes on how they go about requesting that referral. But I think that looking at in terms of being eligible for the FAE&T Plus program, that may be a different viewpoint on how you're taking the term eligibility, I guess. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing, and that kind of helps understand that part of it too.
Yeah, that's really great clarification from everyone. So it's like DHS only is HHS is the only one that determines SNAP eligibility across the board. Right. Yeah. And then it's almost like then the MWA needs to know the students qualifies for the FAE&T Plus program. That's referrals in there, and the third party provider needs to know that. So I think eligibility is used intermittently at all those points, but it is different. So that's great. And so it may be that in your internal process too, you just, figure out different kind of terms for those pieces, because you're going to have kind of 3 points where you need to make sure a student is eligible for services. Any other clarifications or questions about this, or things folks want to raise?
Kate, could I ask a question to folks from the colleges here, and sort of building on what Shelley and Stacy have said? I know that many, if not most, colleges have really leaned into better understanding the basic needs and insecurities that many students are facing, and have considered different resources beyond being a third-party provider for FAE&T Plus like this, but having food pantries on campus and other referrals and resources available for students facing or experiencing food insecurity, housing insecurity. And so it may be a different and parallel assessment process, but just holistically understanding what students' needs are. I'm curious for the folks on the call or in this meeting from the colleges, if they have created or modified their existing assessment process for students at all to sort of uncover and help identify what resources students may need to be set up for success.
This is Rachel from Macomb Community College. we have actually, we've had our Student Options for Success office for over a decade now, and it's sort of the bridge to basic needs. So when it used to be when a student sort of raised their hand and said, you know, I need some help, we would refer students to the SOS office. Now we ask in our admissions application, but only on the credit side. I can't speak to our non-credit programs. On the credit side, we ask about insecurities that folks may have. Do you have any concerns regarding any of the following? We take that data from application and it gets pushed to SOS. So we are doing an outreach before, you know, someone's on fire. Or maybe they are on fire and they're just coming to Macomb to be on fire. And so we have an opportunity to do some outreach either before the semester starts or early in the semester, rather than waiting till the culmination of things getting much more challenging.
That's really helpful, Rachel. Thanks for sharing that. And amazing that it's been over a decade that you've had that office in place.
And this is Susan, also from Macomb Community College, WCE. We actually provide light food during the day, like packaged snacks, noodles, tuna, things like that. So that's available if someone needs it. But we also introduce them on day one to the SOS office if they have further needs.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that and adding that in, Susan.
Yep, you're welcome.
I have a question. So if a college has a student who is on SNAP already, they submit the referral in OSNAS, what's the turnaround time that they would hear back if the student's eligible for ENT?
So generally our referrals interface overnight. I know, as you know, our system has a few glitches with our FAENT referrals. So if we do have to enter a manual referral, like I know we've done that for some of your students before, from other students before, sorry. It does take a few more days other than that, but we can usually have a fairly quick turnaround with that. Sometimes we have issues with if they're pending FIP, cash assistance, we'll have to resolve that program. If we know that, you know, their excess income for FIP or they're not going to qualify for FIP, we do have to wait for the worker to resolve that issue before we can do that referral. But generally we can get a referral entered and it's a 24-hour turnaround, unless we have to do something special with that referral.
Okay. And as colleges are thinking about their eligibility process for identifying students who are eligible for SNAP, if they have a student in their office and it seems like the student fits the qualifications for SNAP, what's the estimated turnaround time for just SNAP?
For just SNAP, we have 30 days to process that application.
Okay.
And, you know, it could be processed sooner. It just depends on what verifications we need to request, what kind of information we need to get to the client, how soon we can get that interview done. There's a lot of factors that go into processing food assistance. So, but generally we have 30 days to process that application, and we do a good job of having that application processed by that 30th day. They could possibly qualify for expedited FAP. We have 7 days to process that. And again, we do a good job of meeting that 7-day SOP. So,
okay. Thanks, Shelley.
You're welcome.
Any other college folks want to share examples of how you've integrated basic needs of students into your assessment process? If not, I'll just share one example from a college that I worked at early COVID, helping with their adult ed program. we had an onboarding process orientation for ESOL GED students, but we weren't really getting at basic needs and security. So as part of the STEP grant, we were able to modify that and ask more explicit questions if students were facing food insecurity, housing insecurity, and then help staff understand what resources were available in referral back to our human service agency for SNAP eligibility, or awareness about the food pantry on campus and how that was being modified during COVID when things were virtual and beyond. And so that really helped us to provide more connections for students for these resources. It also then allowed us in enhancing that process to count the time and effort as we developed that, and for the staff to be, as they were inquiring about the needs of students, to be counting that in terms of their STEP work. And I don't know, Kate, if you wanted to add any more to that, but just a really simple way to better illuminate the needs of students within a specific program.
Yeah, I think, and then I think just other strategies I've seen colleges use too is they've added into their EAB process. Virginia, the whole state, has integrated it into single stop. There are other, and then just any of the program requirements. A lot of times grant funding that has happened, that's been built in. And then I know on the WorkSource side, so the one-stop side, they added some assessment kind of onto their existing applications for the WIOA services. And so just kind of looking at, and then one of the colleges figured out a way to share an assessment across programs, so across college, community-based organization, and the WorkSource Center, so that they were kind of auto-populating that information. And so only asking additional questions that were very specific to the program that they were doing. So just really looking at how to align student experience in that. So lots of potential there. So I think with that, we want to turn it over just in kind of digging in a little bit more into OSMIS and what that actual referral process would look like. So I'm going to turn it over to Stacy. And Stacy, I have time padded at the end, so take as long as you need for your section too.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me get this set real quick and then I can share my screen. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen to kind of do just like a brief OSMIS demonstration for you. And then, and because the login for third parties is different than the login that we would use at the state, and also for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna be switching over to our testing environment, just to kind of be able to like show how to input activities and things like that. So hopefully that won't get confusing when I'm switching between the screens. So to log in, it would be through our My Login system. So the OSMIS is through My Login, which is the official state of Michigan portal to access the different state systems. So you would have your own user ID and password that you would use to log in. And then sorry. Nope. Okay. So then once you logged in, you would go to welfare reform. And then you would want to search for the customer to find out if they already have a referral, or once you've requested that referral, you can search for the customer to be able to pull up that referral once it's come over. So you would go to applicant search, and then you would go to update and registrations. And also chapter 7 of the FAENT manual also provides like a very detailed breakdown of OSMIS and the steps that you would take to register a customer as well. So there's different ways that you can go about registering or looking up a customer. So if you have their recipient ID or their case number, you can look them up by that. If you don't, you can also look them up by a last name, a first name, and then date of birth, and then you would just click submit down here. Let me grab my test customer real quick. So for this customer, I have a recipient ID to put in. So once you search for the customer, so I searched based on the recipient ID, it's going to come up with a customer right here. So it would give the customer's name, their birth date, customer ID, their address, phone number, if they're a welfare participant. So for food stamps, it would say yes. And then what MWA they're associated with. And then you would just click on their name to go into that. So on the participant history screen, this is where you would see the different referrals that they have. So when you're looking for a customer, you're going to want to look to make sure that the participant status is pending. That would mean that they have come over from Bridges, they've interfaced over from Bridges. And so now at that point, you need to register the customer. If it shows active here, that means that they already have an active registration. And inactive means that they're not active anymore, so you wouldn't be able to do anything with that case. So usually it's going to be the top case is going to be the most recent one, and then the older ones will follow below. So, oops, let me go back and I can explain some of those fields a little bit better. So it's going to list the program here, what their referral type is, whether they're a family, ABUD, TLFA. Right now, because we are under a waiver, we won't have any ABUD, TLFA referral types. TLFA is time limited food assistance. And then the last date to attend orientation. So this would be the date that they would need to be registered in ASMIS by, and also have attended their orientation for the FAENT Plus program. If you don't have them registered in ASMIS by this date, they are going to receive a system termination, and then they would switch over to this inactive status. And in that case, then we would have to either request a new referral or do a manual referral. And then the date that they attended the orientation would show up here. This would show when they've had their last activity entered, if they've been terminated in ASMIS, the termination reason, the case manager, the MWA. All right, so first I'm going to go into this inactive one just so I can explain the participant header a little bit better. So this right here would be the participant header. So this is going to have like information on their FAP grant, the number of work fair hours or work experience hours that they would be able to do. And because we're in the testing environment, some of these fields are left blank, but in the actual production environment, there would be data that would come over for all of these fields. So then this would be the monthly required hours. Under the waiver, there's not a monthly required hours, but once we don't have the waiver, then they would have the required hours. And then under here, it would show if their FAP case status is approved, the FAP eligibility period. I think that's about it for that one. All right, so then when you go to register a customer in ASMIS, there's specific fields under each of these tabs that have to be completed. So I'll kind of just go through each tab and then I'll point out the things that have to be completed when registering the customer. So the first tab is the contact tab. So this will have the customer's contact information. This should all automatically come over from Bridges. Under the personal tab, so a lot of the information will again come over from Bridges, but one thing that does have to be answered when you're registering the customer is English as a second language. So whether yes or no. And then on the referral tab, and if I go too fast or if anybody has any questions, just feel free to stop me and ask any questions that you have as well. On the referral tab, this is where you would enter the date attended orientation. So we'll put today's date that the orientation was attended. And then you would want to make sure that you select yes if they're FAENT Plus customer. And outcomes, this would be when, like, after they've achieved a degree or high school diploma or anything like that. So nothing has to be completed in here for registering the customer. And then the status section, again, there's not anything that has to be completed in here when registering the customer. This is where you would go when you're terminating the customer. And then under staff info, for FAENT plus providers, the MWA would give you what's called a region code. We ask that the FAENT plus providers put their region code under optional data 1. The region code field we hold for our 100% providers. And so this is a way that we are able to have 2 different region codes put in and be able to share services among providers when needed as well. And then the case manager field would also be put in. So the case manager field is important to make sure that you have the case manager selected there, so that way they can receive any emails that are automated emails from OSMIS regarding the customers that they have. So once all of those fields are put in, you would click update. And so then up at the top, it's going to show you that it was successfully updated in the database. And then the first activity that needs to be opened up in OSMIS would be the orientation activity. So we put that the customer attended their orientation today, but that doesn't necessarily open the orientation activity. So you do still have to go into activities to open that. So you would go down to the bottom where it says enter activities. And then this is where you would select whatever activity that you are wanting to open up for the customer. So we're going to start with orientation and then click continue. And then this hours field here, this is just considered planned hours. It's not the actual hours that they participated in the activity, but it's a required field. So you can put whatever hours they're planned to participate in for the week here. But then you will still have to enter the actual hours as well, which I'll go over too. So then we'll put in an estimated end date. All right, and then we want to insert the activity. You can also enter the actual hours right there before I just hit insert. Or you can insert the activity and then you can go over here where it says actual hours and click enter. And then this is the section where you would put in the hours. So we'll say that the customer did 2 hours for orientation. So we're going to enter that. And then if you wanted to view the hours, you can go to actual hour status all or actual hour status criteria. Status criteria would allow you to select just a specific date frame. So say you wanted to just pull up a specific month for the customer's hours, you could click that and then just put in the dates that you're looking for. If you clicked on the other one where it was the all, go back and show you that one. It's going to bring up all of their hours. And so the orientation activity is activity 67. And if you're ever unsure of what the activity number is, you can hover over it and it will tell you what that activity is. All right, so we'll go and enter another activity. All right, so we'll put them in basic ed foundational skills. And each of the activities have a different type of required fields that are required to enter that activity. And those are all going to have these little red arrows by them. So we're going to say that the customers plan to do 20 hours a week. And then, oops, select something there. Field of study. And so then this is where you can hit enter actual hours if you want to enter the actual hours right then if they've already participated some of the hours when you're opening the activity, or you can click insert if you are entering the activity hours later. Okay, hang on, sorry, I just got an error that I wasn't expecting. Oh, apparently it wants a institution name. Okay. So there is some fields that aren't necessarily considered required here, but then when you go to enter the activity, it will tell you up at the top if there was another field that had to be completed. So that was one that I wasn't aware of. Sorry. Okay, so now we have basic ed foundational skills activity opened up. So when you're in the activity screen, you can see the begin date of the activity. This is just an estimated end date. And then when you end date the activity, that date would show up here. And then we'll enter activity hours. And so for some activities, you're able to project the hours. We do have listed on the appropriate documentation list for what documentation is needed for activities. And then it would also tell you if you can project hours for those activities. So we'll put in 20 hours for the week of the 16th and click enter. And then when we go to view activity hours, we should see those hours there. And so now it's going to have the 20 hours in that section as well. And again, it will show what activity it is. Right. The next thing that I want to show is how to enter supportive services. Can I click that before top? Okay, hang on, sorry, let me go back once. Okay, so you can either enter supportive services or you can click update supportive services. So we're going to enter. And then if it's regular supportive services, you want to make sure you have support services selected. If they're job retention supportive services, you would select job retention supportive services. Job retention supportive services would only be ones that are provided once the customer is in unsubsidized employment and they're in the 90-day job retention services. So then you would select what type of support service. So we'll say that we are providing clothing. And then you would put in the amount. And then this would be the date that the customer received the supportive services. The funding source, whether it's for FAENT or FAENT plus. And then you would click insert. And so now in here is where it's going to show the supportive services that were provided. And if the customer had any other supportive services that they received, those would show up here as well. And when you enter supportive services, it does also automatically generate a case note. So then that case note would show up in the case notes section. You also want to make sure that when the customer attends orientation, that you enter a case note for orientation. We do have a requirement of at least one case note per month that the customer is active. So that would just be kind of updating, like basically on what the customer's doing in the program and those kinds of things. So to enter a case note, I'll go back just in case you didn't see where I clicked. You would click this case notes section down here at the bottom. And then you would click on enter case notes. And then you would want to make sure that the food stamps program is selected. The subject of what the case note is. So we'll just put down orientation. And then comments, customer attended orientation today for food. In this can obviously be a lot more detailed than what I put in for demonstrating. And then after you have the comments put in for the case note, you would click insert. And then this is where the case note would show up for that. I think that's all that I had to go over for the OSMIS demonstration part. Is there any questions on anything? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it back over to Kate then. Oops, once I figure out how to stop sharing.
And Stacy, this could just be my like lack of brain power today. But so I just want to make sure I can kind of understand. So say someone like, say there's a student at Macomb, right? So say Sue has a student at Macomb. The person's like, student is receiving SNAP. So would she go into Osmos? Can you walk through like what that would look like? So she has a student receiving SNAP, wants to get them into FANT, the FAET Plus program. So so it would be like just kind of the logistics of that. And then when would the like, is there a notification that the referral has been put into Osmos that's at 24 hours and then it's okay to serve and then do the orientation, or just kind of from like the student standpoint, what that journey looks like, I guess would help me make sure I'm understanding fully.
Yeah, so so if they have, say they have like a student there and they want to get them in the FAENT Plus program. So first they would have to go through whatever their MWA's internal process is for requesting that referral. So I guess where I started off with the Osmos demonstration is after they've already requested. So I guess I should have started in the beginning part of it. But that would be after they've requested the referral that they would go into Osmos. So without having that customer over to Osmos from Bridges, there wouldn't really be anything in Osmos at that point that they could do. So they would request that referral over, and then once they were told that the referral was sent over, it would be the next day that they could go in and look up the customer. So then that would be where they could either, if they were given a recipient ID, to look up the customer based on the recipient ID, they could look it up that way, or they can put in the last name, first name, and date of birth and pull the customer up based on that criteria as well. And then, so then at that point, they would be able to either provide the orientation or say that the customer had already received their orientation for the FAENT Plus program. Then they would go in and put it in as of that date, because they wouldn't be able to backdate anything prior to the date that they received the referral. And a part of the FAENT Plus program also is that the customer has to sign the, I can't remember the name of it. It's an FAENT Plus form, plus acknowledgement form. That's it. And that's just acknowledging that they are taking part in the FAENT Plus program. Does that kind of help answer it?
Yeah, that's really helpful. So it's kind of like, but for the student, they're not necessarily having to go enroll in these different places. It's like behind the scenes referral.
Right. Yeah, it's just administratively.
Yeah. And so that
getting
conversation could occur with the student. Orientation happens there. The coach or case manager or navigator at the college could request that referral from the MWA. The next day it's in there, and then they would start their orientation and the plan from there forward. And then on the other side, so say there's a referral, that there's a participant in the community gets on SNAP, the referral from Bridges to the local MWA is made into an like an FAET Plus program. That participant doesn't know what they want to do. Then is there another scenario where that participant participates in an orientation at the MWA and could be referred to a college program as well?
Can you repeat that one more time for me? I'm sorry.
So I'm thinking of like, okay, so we're capturing the people in the college, right, who are on SNAP and getting them access to additional services. But we also want to make sure that more individuals have access to college, right, who are on SNAP. And so if someone was referred, someone gets FAP, like getting my acronyms here, gets the referral from Bridges into Osmos. So then the local MWA has that referral for an FAET Plus program. Then how would that look if then that MWA makes a referral over to the college?
Okay, so I'm gonna see if one of the MWAs that are on the call might be able to help with how maybe their process would be. So I don't know if I see Abby and Mary both on. If one of you two are able to possibly help with how it would work at the MWA level.
Yeah, I can jump in. As Stacy showed in Osmus, we can see a list of any of the referrals we receive. So at the MWA, when we receive a referral for somebody that is receiving food assistance and they're in that program, we do outreach and get them in to schedule them for an orientation. And then when they come into the orientation, they get to learn all about the program, all the different activities they could participate in. And if they express an interest in training, that's when we would kind of make that referral to the training provider, depending on where they're interested in, and kind of make that connection. So I'm in Muskegon, we have Muskegon Community College. So that's one of our close partners that we refer individuals over to. As Stacy mentioned, there is a waiver. So we don't have a ton of active individuals in just FAENT right now, but as we get those volunteer referrals in, we are making that contact and trying to connect them in those employment and training activities when they're interested.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. And then in that situation, so the orientation's happening at the MWA. Does there need to be a second orientation at the college? And I'm just asking these questions, thinking through like program design, right? Like, would there be a second orientation at the college too, or are you good to go from there?
No, there wouldn't have to be a second orientation.
Okay.
They just have to have that one initial orientation for the program. Now, if the community college has their own orientation that they want to do aside from like the initial orientation for the program itself, that would be up to the community college.
Okay.
But, yeah, there's not a requirement for like a second orientation or anything like that.
Okay, so there could be, doesn't have to be, but then people could have a system there that works like that. Okay.
I would add that we're anticipating at GST that our community providers will be doing the orientations, and we'll be providing support by making sure that the referrals over and they're qualified.
That's
So
great.
we want to make it as easy for the participant as possible. We don't, if their entry point is at the college or another FAENT plus provider, but in this particular group, we're talking about colleges, we don't want to run them all over the place.
Great. That's awesome to hear. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at is like, it sounds like a lot of steps practically speaking, but there's a way that for the student or participant, it's actually not. It's all kind of aligned in the works behind the scenes, right? So it sounds like that. And I'm also just thinking like, it can seem like it's a lot of steps or a lot of things, but my experience, we had a very similar system that we had to go in and check boxes and do this in orientation. It was really streamlined. And it was pretty simple for the college staff to do. So just wanted to illustrate that as well. And it was helpful kind of verification processes too, so that we moved away from having to do lots of forms back and forth as well. So just want to look at that.
I think like seeing like, and I was trying to make the Osmus demonstration kind of as easy as possible with it. While also trying to show the different aspects. So, I mean, just like learning any new program, it's going to seem like a lot all at once. But I have found it anyways, very easy to learn and kind of catch on to like different parts of it. And it's all pretty self-explanatory, I think, too, like walking through the different steps of it. And our chapter 7 of our Osmus or of our FAENT manual that has the Osmus instructions is very detailed step-by-step instructions too.
One thing that I would add is that in the case of our community colleges, as opposed to our other community providers, Mott Community College has experience with Osmus. So they have some of their own resources in terms of providing support to someone, so their person may or may not be new to Osmus, but they would have people there that could, in addition to us, provide support on what they need to know to navigate Osmus. So we're not as concerned about that as just making sure that that our community college program really meets the requirements, because this will be the first time that we're doing community college in Michigan. With FAENT, so just making sure that that we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, of making sure that the program design is something that's going to pass muster when monitoring comes along. So we're anxious to see what our community colleges decide to promote to us as their first steps. And I know that Robert and Autumn are working on that, and I don't know if they want to say anything about that, but the next steps will be working on applications and program design.
No, the only thing I would add is just that, what we are proposing, just based upon what we've heard and what we've seen elsewhere, will be consistent with, career pathways programs that we've done that include both credit and non-credit programming. So it will not look unfamiliar to other things that we've done. I think the bigger thing for us right now is that in the past, we have primarily focused on 3 sectors broadly: manufacturing, healthcare, and advanced manufacturing. But we're also seeing some opportunities in other spaces that we think it would be fair to include. So those are the types of things that we're sorting through.
And that very much aligns to, I think, with what we've seen for successful ENT programs with colleges. The offering as third-party providers is, and one of the great things with SNAP ENT is that there is an opportunity to provide a more expansive menu of training options that are based on the student's needs. So I think certainly had lots of experience with really sector-based grants. And then frequently we'd find a student who actually had a really great viable career plan, an economic mobility opportunity that wasn't in one of those sectors. And so this actually was a really great way that we could provide support outside of that. For instance, sometimes early childhood education is one. We know that's not a high paying pathway. It's certainly really needed. There's a lot of social good. And so we would have students who would come in who couldn't qualify for any support through the public workforce system because that wasn't one of the high wage, high demand jobs. But for this student, it actually meant like their 2 children or her 2 children were at the Head Start program. It allowed her to actually make a really great wage in terms, because she did not have to pay for childcare. And then it would allow her to have a pathway to move up, get credentials. And so there was a longer term economic mobility plan. So we actually could support that student there. And so I think that's what I would consider is just that really it does need to be a program that there is, that there are credentials of value, that there are job opportunities for that. And then I think what we found is there's really great opportunity to have that more tailored, individualized, and equity focused conversation with a student about what that career plan looks like. And so it usually was still in the sectors, and those were the high wage, high demand jobs. But I think having a really robust menu and continuum of CTE programs, certificates and degrees, non-credit certificates, credentials, really allowed us to tailor it and to the student, and also what that student's prior experience was too. So sometimes students had all these experience, but they didn't have a credential. And so they actually just needed this really specific credential. So it just encouraged that in the planning. That's very much what we're seeing some other states doing too. And, certainly there can be a focus area, you can start small, but just really would consider that in the program design too.
So Kate, you just actually brought up a thought for me, and this is maybe a question. I don't know if it's either for the Michigan team. Is there any explicit requirement that what we're designing needs to neatly align with the high wage, high demand pathways that the MWAs are typically following based upon the BLS data that is coming out from the state? So I guess that's a question. Is there a requirement or a bias towards doing that if there's not a requirement?
From MCCA's perspective, we don't have any requirements. I think it would be a good question for Mary to answer regarding onboarding a community college, but MCCA, we don't have any requirements. We just want to see this program thrive because we think that it can help all students regardless of their program of study or their field that they're entering.
I think I wouldn't want to be the one to say yes or no, because I think it has to fit into the state plan. Though, as you talked about that example with the early childhood, that's a good example of one that you could make a justification for. Another one that I could think of that you might be able to make a justification for is we're getting refugees in our area who are from Cuba, who had certifications and careers in Cuba, and so they just need to get their credentials. So they might, maybe it would be cosmetology, maybe it would be, I'm not sure if dental hygiene is a high wage, is considered high wage or not, but both of those are programs that Mott Community College offers. And while we might not do that generally, if the tuition could be covered under one program or another, that might be something we'd want to consider. But Stacy, I don't know yet if you if you're writing that into the state plan, or that's something that you'll need to consult on in terms of the high wage issue.
So that I would have to find out more about because I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, that's what I figured, and that's fair enough. You have at least you have a year to say I'm new. I need to check on that.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just going to say from our perspective. So if it's not a requirement, then to us it makes it easier because we don't need to quote unquote try to seek approval or make anything fit or try to justify something on the back end. If it's not a requirement, then we should have the liberty to design the pathways around the programs that we offer. But if it is a requirement, then there may be some things that we need to give some other type of consideration to.
And what I would just clarify or add to is absolutely agree, Robert. And I think from an FNS perspective, it is not a requirement to have a list of programs that are required at all. That's not an FNS rule. And most states, I think, have moved away from that. And in our conversations with Lisa, some of the conversations before, she was really open to and liked the idea that there didn't need to be a list for the colleges of all the approved programs. There needed to be a framework to make sure that certificate and credential was of value for the participant, which colleges with their accrediting bodies already, that's kind of covered, right? You can't issue degrees that don't have some accreditation and value or certificates. So that there would need to be a framework and an explanation to make sure that led to a job, right? Like there was a clear career plan. But I can share, I think I did share with Lisa, and I can send out to this group the narrative that we use that really mapped that out. So what the expectation was is that yes, students had to be into a program that led to a career plan and that mapped to something and a career that they wanted to do, right? So that there was an intent that would go in, but there was no way in part that we could exhaustively list every potential certificate, credential, or program that students across the state would participate in. So we just had really justified kind of the framework. And I know we're off topic, but this seems an important thing, but this really is where the case management comes in, right? And this is why the case management matters, is that's partly the value of that coach and case management at the college is meeting with a student. That's what's built. That's why the assessment matters. Like, what are your skills? What are your goals? And then that's where you determine the plan with the student of what they're going to do and making sure they know the full options and they're choosing the pathway that will offer the greatest economic mobility. And that's something they can do, right? So we would go over hours for work. We would go like conditions of the job on the other side so that there was just a lot of intentional guidance. And then as long as that works, then that could be an approved plan for that student.
I would just echo that. This specific thing came up in my work with all of the Detroit FA&T Plus providers and offering them technical assistance over the last 6 months. And we clarified that for some of the providers because, like, you know, if they were WIOA providers, they did have to use a specific standard and that quality job standard and even approved training providers and things like that. And those things are not requirements for FA&T Plus at all. And yeah, I would just second that your state plan isn't going to have that requirement either, your SNAP E&T state plan. It's really based on, you know, you can do a lot of just this sort of screening of, are you a good provider? Are you making like good determinations about what programs you're offering that are effective and working with the individual, with the student individually, just like Kate described. So it's a different way to think, though, I think, for the MWAs that you haven't been, you do have to have all those considerations for your other employment programs, but SNAP E&T is different. And that's actually the advantage, right? Because you can work with a broader population that don't always benefit from the things that you have to sort of, the parameters that you have to operate within like WIOA.
And same for colleges, if they've had like a TACT grant and there were very specific approved pathways only, or even strengthening community colleges grants, right? You have very specific certificates, pathways you can do. Think of FA&T Plus as actually the great way to fill the gaps for what you're not able to do. So if you can fund things through WIOA or through other programs, this is a way to really equitably serve students. It doesn't mean you don't complement those, but this is a way you can actually really robustly support students in their pathway and goal that makes most sense for them too. Or for longer periods of time. That was the other thing too, is we'd have very short, truncated, for this program, this grant, they needed to be done with training in a year. This is not that program. Like this, that's the amazing part of this, is you really can be student-centered and get people, like I saw the best economic mobility, long-term outcomes with students from this program than all the other workforce programs I'd worked in. And I did a lot. So I do think, I just think that's the value. And then you think about how to design it in your community for your college to complement these other programs, right? So it's not, but how you really can create a great ecosystem for student support.
And we'll be anxious to see, where Autumn and Robert and their team, decide to start. And it may be in a particular career pathway that has some embedded case management already there. That's what we're thinking might work the best, but we're certainly open to hearing their ideas.
So in our last few minutes, I know we kind of indirectly got into case management through this, but really, I guess, although we weren't explicitly as much talking about, this is the crux of why the value of case management is, right? Is making these determinations, supporting students, getting them connected to the support services, leveraging what you're already doing. I think one of the things I've seen in across states and very much happened in Oregon is it was case management technically in the state plan and the project and the grant proposal, but we all called it something different based on what it was called at our colleges, right? So it was navigation at one college, it was coaching at another, it was success coaching at one, it was career coaching at another, it was student resource coordinators at another. So I guess that's the other thing, is just use the model that's working and expand and enhance it with the FA&T Plus. And it can be called whatever it is at your college. I would encourage you not to name it as something separate, just because I think that creates like a confusing scenario for students. But that case management is really just that guidance, holistic support, whatever that looks like. If you call it case management, it's case management, certainly too, but that's kind of the highlight. And this is the value, is helping students kind of making that individual guidance and that support that really, both all three of the students who we started with talked about, that's what really made the difference. And so I think that's the great part, is you can actually fund that through this program that's really hard to fund sustainably.
I think the Michigan plan really speaks to that, because as I've been working with other community providers, we don't ask the community providers to change their activity name. It's our responsibility to translate, because they're not used to our workforce development language at all. You know, MOT is, but our other community providers aren't. So they call it what they call it, and then we translate that into FAENTEs. And say, okay, it's this activity. This is what it, you call it this. This is what the activity is in FAENT, because it's really translating languages.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Mary. And I think you raised a really good point in that the case like that also that holistic support and case management could also happen through a community provider. So there are some states and many models where a community-based organization is actually doing that case management, and they're enrolled at the college. There's lots, I think there's a huge value in still having a coaching component at colleges as well. But where I saw some of the best outcomes with students with a lot of challenges and structural barriers is that if they were enrolled in a community-based organization and receiving some case management there, and then our case management just focused on the college success elements, and that there's a way to align both, which is also very rare in grants. So I just want to encourage that. I think it's kind of like suspending all of the typical notions how our workforce system has worked, and really this is an opportunity to build one that you want and how you want it to work in a really aligned and equity focused way. So and kind of fill in those gaps of like, oh, I wish we could do this with this funding. FANT a lot of times has that flexibility. So I recognize we are at time. And so really do want to reiterate, if there is a second, one or two more learning sessions that are helpful for Michigan and that are very, tactically focused on specific issues, we are happy to convene that. I know there's also options through the ACCT project to continue to get support. We will continue to collaborate, however makes sense there too. And so we will send out the poll and what can be helpful for a next step, but really, really excited and hopeful to see and hear the community college FANT services that come out of this and how it's expanded in Michigan.
That's great to know that that's a possibility. And I think Stacy and Brian Marcotte already know some of the support that we're requesting to get from the interest and the idea now to the nuts and bolts of the application and program design.
Any other last comments from partners, Michigan colleagues? Okay. Well, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a good weekend ahead. And we will be in touch and share the resources here and then send out the information to sign up for follow-up. And then the Michigan project team will meet and see how we can support any of the requests.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.